All right, so let's get started here.
Okay.
Even if you choose not to believe, to say, let's at least talk about the value of Christianity for today. For I look at these universities, the most illustrious universities of the West, and you've all shared with me images of young women draped in kefirs, the symbol of Hamas, performing the Muslim prayer. And tell me if those kids are not morally and utterly lost. So while you and I and Steven Pinker and all of those wonderful people were locked up in our ivory towers, let's ask ourselves what was happening on the ground, because in the last 6 decades, we pretty much demonized Christianity and the teachings of Christianity out of the public space, out of school, out of universities. And a vacuum occurred, and that vacuum is now being filled, as G.K. Chesterton said, not because people have come to reason, but because now they'll believe in anything. There are very awful forces today out there that are claiming the hearts and minds and souls of these young students. And when you say there is nothing, you offer them nothing. But for me, what is even more real...
Do you have any comments so far?
Well, it just reinforces the initial ideas that I think there are a couple of things that will come up later, which is, first of all, Ayaan's definition of atheism and how she perceives atheism to begin with. And the second is how she's actually perceiving the current situation and the type of plan of action that needs to be done by reverting to what has already shown itself to be a losing horse to begin with, that the West has abandoned, and now we are just demummifying it, and now, okay, this is now something that we are going to revive. So that's the
So
main.
you're definitely jumping ahead for sure.
Yeah, but because this piece that she just mentioned is basically in that exact context. Yes, there is something that's going on the ground. Is a rejection of atheism and an embrace of Christianity the answer to this? I don't think so. I really don't think so.
So I'd like to say first, we're only going to be right now talking about whatever the problem she sees and her prescription to solve it, her solution. And we're not talking about the theology or the theological points or arguing why or whether there is a God. So something she mentions here is a moral vacuum that she said started a few decades ago. It's going to get into details later. I'm going to say details later, but I think it's a lot older than just a few decades.
I agree. Yes.
And I think it's a lot more than just a moral vacuum. I believe it is a philosophy vacuum. Morality is part of it. Epistemology is the bigger part of it. And that'll be more clear as we go here. So
okay, let me characterize the situation from my perspective. I don't think it's a vacuum. Here's what I think. What's happening here is that what started in the Enlightenment and continued for centuries has been the West's attempt to react to the old view of things, including religion, but not only religion. And right now, we are at a stage where we have been able to get, at least I'm talking from the perspective of the West. I'm not talking now from the perspective of where she would be coming from and where I would be coming from. We're talking about a completely different perspective that has nothing to do with this. This is just a purely Western thing. And so in the West, the abandonment of religion has created a kind of what seems to be a vacuum, but the situation is still in flux. Assuming that there's nothing that's happening and that, okay, since there is an obvious situation that requires something to fill out, to fill up what's been left by the old ideology that comes with religion, the characterization of the situation is not that, okay, we have settled down in what this abandonment of religion can do, and right now this is the most that can happen. This is a situation that is still in flux. It is not settled down. It has not reached its full potential. The equilibrium that would have been reached had it not been for that interference of a medieval theology that comes from Islam, that has been originally abandoned in the West, would have left the West to continue on a path that would have been a completely different trajectory from what we have right now. Right now, we are forced to revert to some of the things that have been abandoned because of the fact that Islam and the West are so much intertwined in this day that it is required to rethink the situation.
I mostly agree with you. There's one little part that I disagree with, but I'm gonna wait until it comes up in the video.
Okay.
Let's press play right here.
It's the story itself and the wisdom in that story, the morality that has come out, that has evolved out of that story, the internal debates of millennia long and everything that we inherited from it. It's just too casual to cast that aside. And when we've done it, I think we have caused ourselves a great deal of damage. I think that it's very useful now. I hate to go back to utility, but to have all of these things connected, where as human beings, we are material, yes, but we also are more than material. We have a sense of consciousness, and we have a range of needs. And some of these needs, reason can answer, and pure science can answer. But some of these needs cannot be answered by that. And I think faith in a higher power, in God, and in the story that makes sense of it all, gives it meaning, is very, very important for human beings. And the danger lies in trying to conflate these different planes and then casting aside as useful. It is false, it's useful, it's useless, it's unnecessary. And now we have, the range of human suffering, where as an atheist, you don't really offer an answer, you don't offer a prescription for this is a way of life, this is the path to happiness, this is how you can deal with the challenges of existence. And atheism is an attitude. It basically says, as of now, there is no evidence to show that God exists or that a higher power exists, full stop. And you figure the rest of it out. And it's very, very difficult to figure the rest of it out starting from scratch. And I think faith then gives meaning and purpose. And yes, if you're afraid of the dark, and if you're afraid of whatever it is that's causing you anxiety, or whatever is causing you self-doubt, relationships between other human beings, I think Christianity does offer a recipe, and perhaps in my view, the best recipe for not only how to live with yourself and connect to the universe, but also how to connect with fellow human beings, and then bring about a civilization like this one.
So there's a lot of problems with what she said. I'm not going to point out every flaw that I saw.
I agree, actually. But yeah, go ahead.
So she said start from scratch. And I think she said already, or she's going to say later, we shouldn't be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. She's referring to the ideas in Christianity that she's seeing as today we have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Whatever ideas she's saying are good in there. The thing is, we can never throw out the baby with the bathwater. We actually can't start from scratch. That is like against the laws of physics, is what I mean. Starting from scratch, and we shouldn't even want to do that because it means throwing out knowledge that was good. When I say Christianity is false, I'm not saying literally every single idea that is in there, or even that I claim is Christian, is false. I'm not saying that. No different than I'm going to go back to an example that you and I used during June 14th and other times when Einstein brought theory of relativity. It didn't mean that everything about Isaac Newton's theory of gravity and Maxwell's theory of electromagnetism is junk. It doesn't mean that. If anything, it's like a 1% add-on or improvement. And we can argue about what those numbers are, and it is a huge switch in paradigm, but it is not a huge leap in the sense that, like what starting from scratch is like.
If I may, yeah.
From scratch.
Let me just add up and reinforce that particular point. So if I compare what Dawkins considered to be his atheism and what I consider to be my atheism, these are completely different things, because I come from a Muslim background and he comes from a Christian background. The things that we react to are completely different. And I claim, in general, some people claim otherwise, but I claim that atheism is a reaction to the religious environment in which you are. And so the scratch coming, bringing something from nothing, an ideology that just springs out of nothing, this is not something that's even possible, even when you're considering atheism as a form of nihilism that denies everything. This is nonsense. You're actually living and operating and acting within a given environment.
I want to clarify something you just said, and something that both Dawkins and Ayaan Hirsi said, or at least implied. So the idea of atheism is just an idea that there's no God. It doesn't say any more than that. What I noticed from Ayaan is that she's equating, she'll say it later, and I'll stop and clarify. She's equating atheism with also nihilism and also wokeism and a whole bunch of other things. She's basically seeing atheism as what many current atheists are like, rather than it's very similar to what a lot of people do when they criticize Islam. They might, or let's say they criticize Christianity, but what they're criticizing is stuff written in some books from centuries ago rather than what current Christians are doing. Okay. And I think it makes sense to talk about both as separate things. There's Christianity in a book and there's Christianity as it is lived by Christians today. And those are different because centuries have passed and people have changed. The Christians today are different than the Christians 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you can apply that to Islam, and you can apply it to, it looks like she's doing it right now, applying it to atheism. She's seeing it as atheists today, here's how they are. And what do? She says it later. They mock religion and they want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. That means delete everything that was ever said by somebody claiming to be Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever else. Sorry, I'm getting worked up. I got to slow down a little bit.
Well, what I think is happening right now is not a propagation of atheism, but rather an attrition of religion. This is a completely different thing. Now, those vocal atheists, like the new atheists that are trying to promote atheism by criticizing religion, are riding on that wave. I think we talked about that a little bit before, that this is actually not, they're not going to be effecting atheism out of nothing. They're just riding that wave that resulted from the improvement of health, of agriculture, of that need, that initial need that people had for the invention of God. This is something that's being abandoned and not something that's actively being opposed. Opposing it in the form of rhetoric that happens through that activism that comes with atheism is a completely different thing. But the whole phenomenon is not something that you can just counteract and say, okay, let's revert back to Christianity. It's not something that you can do in that way.
I want to explain this to the audience from the context of a video that I put out a while ago. There's this common question that Muslims ask as ex-Muslims. The question is something like, so what do you believe in if not Allah? What they're saying is, okay, and first I want to explain the wrong way that ex-Muslims answer. They say nothing. That's not the correct answer. For one, it's a misunderstanding of the question. The question was poorly worded. Here's what it is meant to be. They're not asking, what do you believe in, just on the question of whether or not there's a God. They're asking the whole goddamn package. They want to know everything about all the claims that Islam makes. What's the counterclaim in your philosophy, your worldview? That's what they're asking. And when I answer with things like, there is cause and effect. Humans are capable of finding it out. I just described a baseline of the scientific approach. For a human being to say, no, there's no cause and effect, every effect is caused by Allah, that's a denial of this framework I'm talking about. And that is the Islamic framework. And maybe all the religions, I don't know, or some of them. I'm sure there's some religions that are not like that, maybe Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever. Another part of the denial of this framework is, when you say there is no cause and effect, that means humans can't find it too. Now, I'll say there are human beings who are not part of that religion or a religion like that, but they have their own internal beliefs that they've gathered from society. Like, okay, there is a cause and effect, but we can't figure it out. So it's half and half.
Yeah.
It's still the effect, though. The effect is the same. We can't figure things out, so don't even think. It's the opposite of scientific thinking. I forgot where I was going with this. Maybe that was the whole point. Should I continue?
Well, I just wanted to mention just a small comment about the way that this was phrased by Ayaan when she was saying to casually throw away things. It's not being done casually. This has been a historical process that took hundreds of years, and there was no way to avoid it. And I think there's a confusion here between what the historical process is and what those atheists are emphasizing by intensifying what seems to be an ideology riding on top of that natural process.
But I'm going to agree with something she said, or she insinuated or implied, which is there are a lot of people doing the casual throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But the blame is they don't know how to think. They don't know that this is against science. This is against reason. They think they're being reasonable, but it's anti-reason. And why they're that way is because they didn't get it in their education.
Yeah, my comment is about not what particular individuals are doing, but rather what's the actual.
I just wanted to defend her a little bit to show the audience I'm not, part of what she's saying, even if she's not saying it, it's part of what, she should be talking like you are about the whole scale.
No, okay. No, I also don't want to come across as someone who's just attacking every point that she's saying. That's not the case. I fully respect the way that she ended up having that position. It's just that I disagree with some fundamental aspects of it, and I think that's not necessarily the best path to go about doing what she wants to do.
Yeah. All right. So we continue.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the attitude that atheists take, that if you do not see the world the way they see it, and if you don't live according to reason, you must be an idiot. I look at those young people in their 20s, in their teens, in their 30s, and right now they're being offered these messages of moral frameworks that they're embracing that are cultish, that are based on fear, that are nihilistic, and that are dead end. And so if you say you're on Team Christianity, then I would encourage those who are so inclined as to advance Christianity, not to worry about Africa, but to start it here. Stand up to those people
Yes, I
in
didn't
Columbia
quite hear.
and Harvard and
what's the
Penn U.
problem?
And there are mosques and Islamic centers that have convinced young people here in America and in Britain and elsewhere that Christianity is dead, has nothing to offer, that Western civilization is a moral vacuum, and that they're here to fill it. And to my astonishment, it seems as if they're making an impact.
So there are people who, I think we should be looking at things like atoms, on a small scale. Each individual human being. There's a lot of human beings in the West who do not have a moral vacuum and who are not Christians. They're atheists. And if you ask the question, well, why is it that some other atheists have this vacuum? That's the answer to that. I think Ayaan Hirsi is missing, and I think Dawkins is missing too. You can see it in his answers. He just says things like, well, let's try harder, which isn't really an attempt to understand what the problem is in the first place. That's trying to say, well, whatever the problem is, let's push the gas on the solution. But you got to understand the problem better. So Ayaan Hirsi brings up something from in her restoration project that she started recently. She mentions this thing that started, I think it's in the 80s, where the Russians started this, what they call Subversion project, where they're subverting the American culture. And I think they've been very successful. She brought on this KGB defector onto her show to discuss with him. He happens to be a Christian, by the way, now. And, there's a video. You can find this on YouTube. I have it linked in places in my material. A video of him in the 80s in an interview where he's explaining that Russian methodology. And it's propaganda, okay? It's very deep, strong, many decades long plan propaganda. But you got to ask, how can propaganda succeed in the first place? Like she said, from a vacuum, something is filling it. When you're stupid, you can get fooled by propaganda. If you're extremely smart, it's much more difficult to get fooled by propaganda. It's not impossible. It still happens. I'm sure I have some ideas in my head that are propaganda statements that I don't know are propaganda. So let me have a few minutes to explain how I understand this. Okay, I read a book called The Underground History of American Education. I've talked to you about this before. I'm going to remind you again. It's new to the audience, probably. The man who wrote the book was a New York City school teacher for 30 years. He won awards for New York Best Teacher of the Year a couple times. He was trying to understand what's wrong with the school system. For 30 years, he was collecting data, symptoms that didn't make sense to him. So he kept digging and digging and digging. And what he learned was that after our Civil War, 1860s, the American compulsory education system started. It was the first time where, okay, now you can be punished by law for not going to school, a school run by the government. And you can look up the documents that were written by the psychologists who designed the American education system. And they very clearly say what they were trying to do, what the goals were. The goal wasn't make people smarter so they can improve their lives. The goal was make people obedient. They still need to be smart enough to work for companies, to be engineers and work in factories. So they need an education on that level. But we don't want to give them an education that would make them great thinkers, because now we would have to compete with them. We don't want to compete with them. This is the thinking of the people who started this. What people I'm talking about? The richest families like Rockefeller and Carnegie, those guys. They wanted employees for their companies. Okay, now, and they wanted to be able to guide people to what they wanted without having to compete with, if you're smart enough, you can question the status quo, the political status quo, the status quo of the whole world, of everything. You're not smart enough, you can't. You can easily be fooled by propaganda, internal propaganda in your own company, your own country, but also anybody else. So other countries. And that's what's been happening. It's been 8 generations. And I'll just say real quick what it is that they did that led to, or the main thing that they did that led to what she calls the moral vacuum. They erased, I guess first I should explain what the standard education was before that. The standard education, going back to like Socrates, was to learn philosophy, okay? It didn't get known by this name yet, but this became known as the classical education. The classics was like Socrates, but the classics is whatever is older than you, right? So Isaac Newton said, if I have seen a little further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. The giants were the ancient Greeks. Well, today, Isaac Newton is a giant for me. Einstein is a giant for me. And there's people that are living today that I am standing on the shoulders of, like David Deutsch, Sarah Fitzclarridge. Erasing philosophy from an education is what mostly resulted in, philosophy is, epistemology, the study of knowledge. How are you going to know what's true and false? Without this, then you're just believing what other people told you because you don't know how to think for yourself. So that's the thing. That's the main issue. And she's missing it. He's missing it.
No, I fully agree with you. That's probably what he should have emphasized. There is,
aware of it.
Like she said at the beginning, there is basically that institution that has been polished for thousands of years, the institution of Christianity, that has been tried for so many centuries and has been tweaked and worked on. But that doesn't mean that this is actually the only solution. Just because of the fact that something works from a pragmatic point of view in a certain way does not mean that it is actually the way to go. And like you said, going to the basics, going to understanding things about how things work in reality, that's going to be the remedy of this whole thing. Now, if there's a defective schooling system that is causing this to be suspended, that means that you're actually emphasizing that problematic part, and you're just suspending any judgment on it and saying, okay, things are the way they are, and let's actually just look at what's available and try to see if it's going to fix the problem. So that's an issue. But I want also to emphasize something else about what she said about the role of mosques and the way that propaganda is being propagated in this way. I'm not sure how effective it is in reality in terms of numbers. I know that there are certain impressionable young men who might be swept very easily if they don't have
they can be swept out just as easily.
Yeah, and we also have to take into account not only the presence of a vacuum, but also the personal aspects that might drive a person to think about seeking a mosque, the same way that she had to go to a vicar in order to talk to him about what is it that she's going through and saw a light that way. That's basically what drives people to go to mosques. They're not going to go to mosques just, there's a new ideology about the existence of God that's provided in Islam that's not there in Christianity. We're selling a better product. Come take a look at. That's not what they sell.
So I want to clarify for everyone: the classical education, to read the Greeks and read everything before you, that includes. I want to be very clear for everyone. That includes studying morality. And in order to study morality, you're going to have to study what everyone said about morality, regardless of what their belief about God is. So if I'm going to study morality, I should look at Christianity and Islam and all the other ones.
Yeah.
Pick out the good. If it's good, keep it. If it's bad, get rid of it.
Agreed.
So just to say a few ideas, and so let's see. The concept of revenge is bad. From what I understand, that comes from Jesus Christ. I believe in that. That is good. In Christianity, they talk about pride being dangerous. That's a good thing to be teaching. Okay, I don't know that they explain it very well, but really everything that actually is good in Christianity is better explained today than it was back then. We're improving on it, so current versions of that stuff is better than old versions. But in order to understand the current versions, it makes sense to learn the history of the ideas, just like we do in physics. When a physicist becomes, when Einstein ended up with creating theory of relativity, it is because he learned the entire history of ideas before that. He wasn't going to make relativity if he didn't really study those very well and understand the history of ideas better than other people before him. You have to study the history of ideas. That's not happening in school.
Well, for morality, I'm not sure how effective that would be, because there is a very personal component that goes into this. Just learning that revenge is not a good thing does not mean that you're going to eventually somehow change what might be happening inside a person. This is something that has to do with upbringing. It has to do with...
Worse than that. It's worse than that. I think, I don't know that I understand the word zeitgeist, but I'm going to try to use the concept here, okay? I remember when I was trying to understand something about... I was trying to find out what word I need to translate into Arabic from English. The word was jealousy. And when I was going through the translations, I noticed... And I noticed I didn't even know the meaning in English, by the way, the difference between envy and jealousy. The understanding that I got was, in English, envy just means, hey, I want what you have, but I'm happy that you have it, and I'm not resentful. Jealousy is adding on, I'm resentful, and I hate you for you having it, and I don't have it. When I was looking into this, I found out that in the Western world, going back to ancient Greece, jealousy is seen as negative. But in the Arab world, it is seen as positive. Holy shit, that freaked me out when I noticed that. That's more of a zeitgeist issue. It's not just it is going to be your upbringing. Hopefully you had an upbringing, I wasn't raised over there, so I guess I don't count. But like, let's say you were raised over there. You could have been in a family that was exceptionally good and correctly saw jealousy as bad. Or you could have been in a more normal family and you are being exposed to ideas that are thousands of years old in your culture. And then you come over here, and for them, they've been taught ideas for thousands of years of the opposite. It's not easy to change. Yes, I agree with that.
Commenting on that, just the actual concept of envy, hasad, which is something that appears in the Quran. This is something that has a kind of a magical nut.
Like evil eye.
Yeah. So there is actually...
Isn't that jealousy rather than envy?
This is actually for envy. Usually, when you talk about hasad, that's usually translated.
Maybe they're mistranslating the words.
Yeah, but to be envious, this is a really something that's really considered very bad.
Well, maybe they don't even see my guess is the person who wrote the Quran. This is just a theory. I don't know the details. Maybe he didn't even see the potential for the kind of envy I'm describing, which is, I like what you have. I want it for myself, but I have no resentment that you have it. Maybe they don't even conceive of that. So for them, envy and jealousy is one word, one concept.
It's a little bit hard to know, but I know that there are a couple of surahs in the Quran that have to do with that seem to have preceded the Quran in terms of their inclusion in the text. It seems that there were incantations that are said in order to protect you from
the evil eye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it would be the kind of work that you would need to change that from your mind. First of all, even recognizing it, I think, would be immense for somebody. And I'm on the side of it, recognizing it, and I thought that was a big deal.
Yeah, and something like that, being a little bit paranoid about what other people are literally doing with their eyes when they're looking at your things, things that belong to you. This seems to be something that originated from the mannerism of Muhammad himself. And that's actually the scary thing, that they are imprinting that kind of behavior because it's supposed to be holy behavior, something that is...
Well, there's a separate problem, an underlying idea, which is that I'm going to say the opposite of it here. Okay, so here in America, if I understand this correctly, if somebody heard the concept of evil eye, they would recognize it right away as a stupid superstition, even if they believe in some other superstitions.
Yeah.
Okay. But not in the Arab world.
No.
Not at all. And these two ideas have to go together. Like you can't have the idea of evil eye or having the paranoia of evil eye or because somebody's envious without also having the underlying idea that even that shit is possible.
Yeah.
Some thing it's supernatural. They think it's supernatural. It's not nature. It's not laws of physics. It's I mean, there are Americans who think similar things, Well, they have names for this. I forget the name now. Telepathy or whatever, putting ideas in somebody's head. They have that. Some of them believe that stuff.
So to actually see something like that convincing, you probably have to be exposed to it at a very small age, and to see it normalized by adults, and to see them react as if it's something that's real, and so
just
on.
Like jinn.
Yeah,
just like jinn. The people that believe in jinn, part of why they believe in it is everyone around them also believes in it.
Yeah.
And if they were in a scenario where half the people believed in it and half of them didn't, maybe it would be easier.
Yes.
But maybe they're getting that now with the internet, because they come in the ex-Muslim subreddit and they say this jinn stuff, and then they hear me calling it stupid, and I don't mind using that word about it. It's stupid. It's insane. Okay? We here recognize it as stupid and insane. I think it helps them to know that there's people like us that exist. Like, we see that as fucking sane. Where they are, even I bet even if they met someone that didn't believe in it, they wouldn't be extremely open about their conception of it, like calling it insane. I think they would just say, no, I don't believe in that because I don't want to get my head chopped off.
You have this amazing civilization, you have these amazing societies, and it is pretty frightening to see that the best and the brightest are converting to the mind virus of wokeism and the mind virus of Islamism, and that as atheists...
I'm going to pause real quick. She said the best and the brightest. I know that's a phrase used about people in college, but the people that she's referring to that are falling into this trap, they are not smart. They are... Go ahead.
No. Actually, you exactly pointed out the main issue here. So she is actually conflating wokeism and the original phenomena that she was talking about, of how these people are repeating prayers that they don't understand. That wouldn't have happened had it not been for wokeism, which is now making these young people appear as if they became Muslims. They are not. These are not the brightest people.
And we would not have been susceptible to wokeism if it were not for erasing the education I was describing.
Yeah. So just because someone started reciting something they don't understand because of the fact that they think they are producing some kind of or exhibiting some kind of solidarity, or performing some social activism, that does not make them a Muslim, and that does not make Islam the way that or the path that these people are following. That's not the same thing.
Yeah, it's not much different than in marketing. People who understand marketing understand that it's not just about, if you think of the first step before making a sale, first step is, get attention, get people listening to you. But if you are not very targeted and you bring in anybody, then you get a very small, weak conversion rate to an actual sale.
Mm-hmm.
So people getting in, the number of people getting in doesn't matter. It's the quality of how they got in and what they're doing. So all these people that are siding with Islam and all, you could say Westerners becoming Muslims, that's not the same thing as some other countries, people becoming Muslims.
Yeah.
Because of the culture they're coming from.
And let me just emphasize a point that I mentioned before. The rate of conversion of people from one religion to another, it doesn't matter whether it's Islam or not. This is a very, very, very tiny minority. The way that Muslims increase their number is just through bedrooms.
Well, we don't know what their numbers are anyway. Nobody knows. Because a couple of things. The people inside the Muslim majority countries are afraid of getting their heads chopped off. So they will lie on a pole. Okay. Yeah. And then the people here in the West who convert to Islam and then leave, they're so embarrassed. They don't want to talk about it anymore. They're not going to answer a poll. They're like erased from the digital world.
Yeah.
Some of them don't, of course. Some of them do come out, but you're not going to know those numbers either.
Yeah, I'm really not worried about people converting in masses to Islam.
Yeah.
I
mentioned it because there are a lot of people worried about it.
Yeah. I'm not.
Okay, me too. Should we continue?
Okay.
No one even seems to have woken up to the idea. There is a condemnation of wokeism, which you do. You condemn the woke and the mind virus of the woke. You condemn radical Islam. But I think, what do we then have to offer to these young people who are seeking something?
Rational secular humanism.
We have a lot more than that. I said this to you on our last meeting. There's people who go by the name objectivism or objectivists. Another name is Randian, people that understand Ayn Rand's philosophy. It's a philosophy that is atheist. There's no God in it. It's very heavily moral. Like there's a lot of morals in it. There's a little bit of epistemology, but the moral stuff is the bigger stuff that's in there. And there's political in there too. And it's a lot about, sense of life. And, the question of things like, she was saying earlier, because this is not just a political issue. She was saying earlier, she said it more so in the part of the video that I didn't put here. When people have a spiritual vacuum, that's a problem. And then she didn't explicitly say it, but she was saying that you're going to be depressed because you're not going to have a meaning for your life and stuff like that. You can have a meaning of your life and create that and not be depressed without a belief in God. And there are philosophies written by atheists that are older than the stuff she's talking about.
Yeah.
So for her to act like that doesn't exist, that's not fair. And I think she knows they exist.
Let me actually say something about Dawkins. In debates, and I've seen a few debates that he's in, he doesn't bring up much in terms of strong arguments, to be honest.
I think he seems to be just sticking to the theology. He doesn't talk about morality, really. I mean, he does a little bit, and he says it here a little bit, but he's very surface level.
Yeah, and even when it comes to the actual situation where you throw something at him as a kind of an argument, very often that's not the case. If you've ever seen, he had he was hosted in Al Jazeera in, I don't know, 10 years ago maybe. It was a famous it was supposed to be an interview, but it was actually really a kind of a veiled debate. And he really did horribly in it. The interviewer was well prepared, and he basically was attacking certain aspects. So
it's a bit unfair when it's a scenario where you didn't have plan to you didn't have time to prepare beforehand. I would prefer something in writing. You want to give me an argument? Give it to me in writing. Let me have a week to reply. He's replying, split second.
Yeah, but that's different.
Too much.
But that's different. Dawkins knows Ayaan for a long time. So if you know that person for a long time, maybe you don't need as much preparation as.
Okay, but I don't know if you noticed in this video, there's at least 2 times where he says, "I'm not aware of that," so he doesn't know all the arguments that she's bringing. A lot of this information is new to him.
Yeah. So he's basically sitting with a friend, talking to a public who's listening in to their.
Well, also you'll notice if you watch the full video, you'll notice Dawkins keeps going back to the theology question, and Ayaan Hirsi keeps trying to get away from that, saying, "Let's agree to disagree. I'm going to get back to the political issues."
Yes.
And then he talks about that a tiny bit. He goes back to theology. We're now talking about the political issues, Anyway.
So there is actually I think he's onto something here when it comes to, okay, you're calling yourself a Christian. What does that actually mean? I think he.
I agree with that.
He brings up certain things about the Trinity, about certain theological aspects of what it means to believe in Jesus, and she doesn't actually give a straight answer, which I understand. When it comes to someone who is presenting a pragmatic reason for becoming a Christian, that's what you would expect. When she says, "I choose to believe," it means I'm going to be suspending my judgment on this, and I'm going to be taking
But what he's doing is criticizing her solution to the problem. He's not even questioning her understanding of the problem.
But this is a different thing. So for me personally, I'm disagreeing that Christianity is necessarily the utilitarian solution of the problem, but I'm also seeing that there is a problem with this basis. When you're talking about this as I'm a Christian, and Christian people hear that, they would say, "Oh, she accepted Jesus in her life," which she probably has some personal aspect to it. That's the aspect that started at the beginning of the whole talking about that personal experience that she went through. But identifying this with full-on Christianity and what people understand, typically people who were raised as Christians, understanding this as Christianity as such, it's not quite that.
Yeah.
Rational secular humanism is itself an outcome of Christianity. And
well,
I think
I don't buy that.
It starts with the admission that rational secular humanism, the Enlightenment was able to take place within that Christian context, and it is a product of Christian civilization. It didn't happen in China, it didn't happen in the Middle East, it didn't happen anywhere else. It happened in these disputes between Christians.
So something she's avoiding saying is the ancient Greek influence in that area. And that is something that also wasn't in those other countries she's talking about. So she's doing the correlation is causation mistake. She's seeing a correlation between, hey, look at this cool stuff that happened during the Enlightenment in the West. Oh, and look, they had Christianity. Bam, that's the cause. No, that's not how thinking works. There's the ancient Greek influence, and that is also a correlation between what happened in the Enlightenment in Europe and ancient Greece. But here's the thing: I'm not fully disagreeing with the idea that Christianity was evolved. I do think it was, but if anything, it's that Christianity was an evolution of that area, in that area.
Yeah. So just having that polarity where you would say, okay, there was some kind of a reaction to Christianity and it was overthrown. That's not the case. Enlightenment has evolved from within Christianity, but it wasn't a kind
Well,
of
they were atheists too.
well, if you look at the history, that's not really what happened. You can actually see within the age of the Enlightenment actual figures within the Christian church who were actively doing things that would have been considered as part of that Enlightenment. So it's not that it's completely polar, but it's definitely not a Christian product as such in the sense that the Christian church at the time did not embrace all these values, and it still doesn't. Many of the values that you would get out of enlightenment are still especially opposed to the
But
Catholic Church, which was the church that eventually was present then.
she's trying to give basically all the credit of the product of the Enlightenment to Christianity when there's other credits. I think maybe there's some, but even the credit to Christianity is still unfair because Christianity itself evolved from those people, that area, in the context of Europe, including ancient Greece ideas, which are predate Christianity by 600 years.
Yeah. So I would even say that to some extent it was the interaction between these ancient ideas and the people who were Christian at the time that played a part in what we actually saw. So enlightenment as we see it is definitely a product of the West, but equating the West with the Christian West, that's not this is a very tenuous thing at best.
And I think part of that story and that whole history is one that needs to be celebrated and told and given to these young minds. And I think where you have a vacuum, something is going to fill it. And aside from the personal rewards that I reap from Christianity and that you reap from Christianity, I think there is the societal and the civilizational context where this thing is going through the cracks, and without a counter message, a spiritual counter message, I think we're in very, very bad and very, very serious trouble.
It may be.
So she said it right there. She thinks having a lack of spirituality is part of the problem. She thinks atheism itself is part of the problem. And again, she's conflating that with wokeism. And she even said, she even used the word nihilism somewhere in this video to refer to atheism.
Equating atheism with the vocal people who are advocating atheism as an alternative to religion is not actually representative of what's happening on the ground. Once again, what's really happening is an attrition of religion. The religion is losing its utility. That's going to create a vacuum of some sort when it comes to things like spirituality. But that doesn't mean that the thing that you just abandoned is the thing that you're just going to extract once again and revive because you have been encountering another similar ideology that has the same components. Now, when it comes to Muslims, and the way that they perceive atheism, they usually consider it as a Christian product. In fact, very often we are accused, when it comes to debating Muslims, they very often accuse us of being veiled Christians. Because we are presenting to them something that comes across as a product of the West. And so what I think is happening here is maybe she has not fully purged herself of that Muslim mentality that the progress that you're seeing in the West is the product of Christianity. Christianity is no doubt part of this, but that's If you look at medieval Christianity, why hasn't it progressed in the way that progress took place when people started moving away from religion? Is that should be the question.
What was I going to say? I think there's another mistake, and I don't know if it happened already in this video or if it's going to happen later. She said that she used to mock religions when she was an atheist. And she also said somewhere else that is wokeism. That's what multiculturalism is to say that all the religions are equally bad, or at least that they're equal. So if you think one of them's bad, then you think they're all equally bad, which she admits that she used to do. I think that doesn't make any sense at all. I didn't even know she did that. I'm surprised to find out that she did that. I don't remember ever, like when I became an atheist, I don't remember ever thinking that they're all the same. I'm very surprised that she would think that, given her context of being a Muslim, an ex-Muslim. You know, I used to only hear it from the multiculturalist. And here's the point. She became woke when she did that. And she's reacting to her old wokeism by becoming a Christian to combat it.
Right now, being woke actually also includes, to some extent, not criticizing religion at all, because this would be part of a person's identity.
You can flip-flop very easily when you don't have any epistemology.
Yeah,
basically, when some woke leader decides, hey, now we're going to go this way, everyone follows.
Yeah, but most definitely during this time, if you compare Christianity with Islam, they are not on the same footing when it comes to things on the ground.
It may be true historically that rational secular humanism grew out of Christianity, in the sense that historically that's where it came from. But you could say it's a reaction against Christianity rather than having being in concert with Christianity.
But even as a reaction against Christianity, the advances that we have made are rooted in that story. And my objection to throwing the baby out with the bathwater is that if you create this disconnect so that young people they haven't been told of those debates, they're reading works that tell them that everything that the white male Christian left behind is exploitative, it's destructive, it has to be replaced with something else, it's settler, colonial, whatever. It's being cut off from the roots of that civilization. And I think part of the reason why that vacuum came about and it was possible was because of this casting aside of Christianity and this attitude within atheism that if you say reason, everybody will suddenly start becoming, reasonable. And
that sounds like the dumbest shit I've ever heard. I don't know why she just said that. I think she was trying to make fun of somebody that actually had a good argument. She's doing like a straw man argument. Yeah. I don't think anyone ever said, if we say the word reason, people are going to be reasonable. You know what I mean? She's just shooting down somebody's actual, and she hasn't said the real argument. That is very unfair. That is not what an intellectual does. That is not intellectual.
Think reasonably, and in that sense, that's been a mistake. G.K. Chesterton was right.
Do you regret having been part of the new atheism movement, having preached atheism from that pulpit?
I do regret doing that, and I want to say that when I realized the damage that I was doing, and I was doing a great deal of damage by equating Islam with Christianity. First of all, it is false. We were talking about truth and falsehood, and not all religions are the same. Religions are different because they come out of different cultures and grow out of different contexts. So Christianity is not the same as Islam, and I'm guilty of having said, well, all faiths, all perceptions of God are the same and they're equally damaging.
So she might have said it, but I don't think her actions spoke that way. She was predominantly opposing Islam and its effects. I personally don't remember her speaking out against Christianity as such. All her activism was directed towards Islam. I'm sure that given her association with the new atheism, as a bunch of friends, she actually calls it fun at some point. That made her part of that fold that was also opposing Christianity as a religion, since it's going to be bundled with Islam. But when it comes to her experience with her everything that she I cannot pretend to have read everything. My main exposure to her was through her book Infidel and Heretic, which I think are great books. I really highly recommend them. In that case, it was things that were directed against Islam and the experience that she had gone through.
So I wonder why she's saying this contrary thing. I wonder if she's misinterpreting her past self, or if she thinks just by aligning herself with the new atheists and without criticizing their actions, she in effect promoted their conception that all religions are the same.
Possibly. I'm not going to think about interpreting what she said, but my personal exposure to her, I did not get the sense that she was talking against Christianity as such, or criticizing that. Now, admittedly, I have read those a while back, so maybe she said something somewhere, but that's not the impression I have, and that's never actually the impression I got from her. Usually when you say Ayaan Hirsi Ali, in my mind, it's not atheism that comes to mind, but rather a strong feminist who has gone through a bad experience in Islam and left Islam as an ex-Muslim.
Well, I remember her saying that the West has a philosophy of life, and the Arabs or Islam has a philosophy of death, and maybe she didn't use the word Christianity to refer to that is what the West is, but she's saying it now, and the point is, I don't know, maybe she's lamenting that she didn't talk about it that way.
Have come to regret the damage that I've done, and I want to make my friends like Richard and Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett and all the others. I want you to see what I see, and what I see is where you have a moral vacuum, something is going to fill it. I want you to see that the teachings of Christianity, just like you said, if there is a competition between Team Christian and Team Islam, you would be on Team Christian. That what you value in Christianity is something that really is absolutely necessary to pass on to the next generation. And we have failed the next generation by taking away from them that moral framework and telling them it's nonsense and false, but also not protecting them then from the external forces that come in for their hearts, their minds, and their souls.
So, Team Christianity. I'm on Team Christianity, but I'm also on everybody's team in the sense that I want to get the best ideas from anywhere, whatever team it is, even if it's Islam. Okay?
Right. But the problem with religion is that it's not a set of ideas. It's in addition to being ideas, it's also a lived experience. So if you look at Christianity in its most abstract form as a set of ideas, and let's maybe forget about Paul for the time being and think about what Jesus would say and extract the good things that he says, and then look at the history of Christianity, look at what happened in the Middle Ages that has been done in the name of Christianity. Because it's a lived experience as a kind of an interpreted set of ideas, that does not tell you necessarily if someone is Christian, okay, that means that they are necessarily better than a Muslim. That's not, there's no necessary connection there. You can be also a Muslim and you can be a very moral person You could be doing good things, interpreting the ideas, whether they come from the Quran, Muhammad, whatever. So religion is not purely a set of ideas.
I mean, I don't know if this is a useful analogy, but if you meet a physicist and you meet an engineer, I'm using this example because I come from the physics world, and I remember hearing about sometimes them making fun of engineers, the way they think. Okay? But there are gonna be some engineers that are smarter than some physicists. That's gonna be the case. You know, it's like you got to think of like percentage of, you know, it's very similar to the average man is faster running than the average woman, but the fastest woman is faster than, I don't know, 99% of men.
Yeah.
So,
well, you should look at how mathematicians view physicists then.
Oh, what is that? They make fun of us too?
Yeah, so
I didn't know.
When it comes to the way that physicists do math, mathematicians usually get a heart attack from it because they consider it too sloppy.
Okay. Yeah, I guess so. But I think our way is better, by the way. I think we're doing math better than them. But in general, physicists are not creating new math. Isaac Newton did. I don't know that there's a lot of physicists that did that.
String theory originated in physics, and right now it actually has inspired a lot of things, both in physics and in math.
Wow. Okay. Another day.
We have secular humanism, we have rationality, we have moral philosophy. Moral philosophy is how we decide which bits of Christianity we like and which bits we don't, which bits of the Bible we take as being moral and which ones we don't. We cherry pick. And the basis for our cherry picking is modern secular moral philosophy, which is a well-established philosophical discipline, and it's on that basis that we decide what is moral and what is not. We decide in favor of feminism, of all the things that we value today, which do not come from Christianity. They come in spite of Christianity, in spite of all religions.
One thing he's missing when he says that, moral philosophy on its own, without having a functional epistemology, doesn't work. You need epistemology, the study of knowledge, the study of how do you decide true and false. And I'm talking about the scientific approach, scientific thinking.
Yeah.
Without a method of reason, any ideas can come in, any moral ideas, and you wouldn't know how to know it's wrong.
Yeah, I think he probably could have formulated a better way of saying this whole retort, not just presenting philosophy, but also maybe talking about actionable things, because this is a little bit abstract.
He makes a very good point here, though, about feminism and the point that we're using our own mind to. He didn't say it this way. We're using our mind to judge Christianity.
Yeah, yeah.
And that what we're using is a philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So like if we were to say, hey, Christianity contradicts science, so does that mean science is wrong or Christianity is wrong? Well, it's more complicated than that. It's deeper, but it's clearly not so simple to say, well, it means science is wrong. First of all, they're at different levels of things. Science is a methodology. Christianity is not a methodology. It is a set of conclusions.
Yeah.
And what people do often is confuse science for, instead of thinking of it as a methodology, they think of it as today's set of conclusions.
Yeah, yeah.
But in terms of, you asked, what do you mean by a moral vacuum? And what can we fill that moral vacuum with? the conception or the perception of the difference between right and wrong is, I think, something human beings have been trying to answer for millennia. And we have reached, different human beings and different categories of human beings have reached different answers. And I think that if you take the history and the story of the moral story of this civilization, if you say, well, it's useless, let's mock it, let's cast it aside, what emerges is a generation of young people growing up who haven't been, provided with their Christian or their Judeo-Christian moral framework, and they also, for some reason, haven't been given what you are saying you're offering now, which is a moral humanism, or I haven't seen any kind of organized, in the way religions are organized, temples of reason and people dedicated to delivering a message of morality to young people.
Temples of reason are called schools. It's just fixing schools that's the issue. That's
they're not really temples of reason anymore. They're vessels of indoctrination. But
yeah,
here's the thing: so are the religions.
Yeah. And just pointing out something here. Okay, if you see something good in Christianity, take it from Christianity and use it. Do you have to actually adopt the entire package that involves all sorts of other things that might be questionable or might be reprehensible? Because usually if you're going to identify as a Christian, that's going to necessarily put you within a group that's going to start enforcing other things that might not have anything to do with why you picked that particular good idea in the first place.
So what I think part of what she's saying is that the famous atheists, the new atheists or whatever, are not delivering a moral framework. And then she's also saying that in the temples of reason, supposedly, the universities and the schools, they're also not doing it. So here's the thing. The schools are doing that. I don't know too much about the new atheists. I mean, he just clearly said, hey, humanism, secularism, feminism, that is a moral framework. So he is saying it. I didn't read his book, The God Delusion. My guess is it's really only talking about God rather than morality. I could be wrong, but if he really wants to,
he does go through the gamut of various things that.
So then, really, she's strawmanning him.
So the thing about this is that if I want to try to portray the way that she's describing the situation, there is an emergency, a societal emergency that's taking place. Atheism / secularism is not up to the task. It's not mature enough to handle that onslaught of Islamism, of possibly wokeism. And so because it's an emergency, you look at what's in your toolbox. The available thing in the toolbox is that old thing that you threw away a while back. Just bring it back. That's essentially what it is. And I think what's happening here is when it comes to atheism, which unfortunately, again, when you look at the discourse that is delivered by Dawkins and to some extent Hitchens, not so much Dennett or Sam Harris when it comes to the new atheism, they seem to be presenting a new ideology as if it were a new ideology that's going to be replacing religion, and that's. Yeah, and so that's the problematic aspect. There is no, you don't have the infrastructure to actually start saying, okay, this is the alternative. Here is a set of ideas. Go now and implement it. This is something that requires time.
Yeah. So you bring up an important point. What I think Ayaan Hirsi cares about and is not saying is that, Christianity is a lot further along in doing its job of like getting adherence. And I think she's saying atheism has so far failed and has, that's confusing now because there are a lot of atheists now, but her complaint is they're morally bankrupt and spiritually bankrupt. So I guess the better way to say it would be that the philosophies of atheism, the philosophies that happen to have no God in it, have so far not gotten a lot of adherence the way Christianity has, and so they're just too small to matter.
Yeah, essentially.
And that's a very just purely practical thing.
That's exactly the point. That's what I'm saying. Equating that with atheism, saying, okay, I'm no longer atheist, that does not really describe her entire attitude before and after.
Universities and schools would provide that, and that universities and schools, again, separated from their Christian underpinnings, started to say, we are neutral grounds, and we are going to adopt a moral neutrality towards religion and faith. And that's where the vacuum emerged. Young people looking for moral direction, not getting it from their own civilization, and other forces coming in and filling that out. And that is the crisis that you are witnessing now. And I think it is I'm not evangelizing. I'm not imposing a new or an old form of morality, but I'm saying that we are having a very, very serious moral crisis. And I hope that this is just the first conversation, but for those of us, I am coming out and saying, when I was advancing atheism and saying that Christianity is nonsense and it is just as nonsensical and as dangerous as Islam, I was absolutely wrong, and I contributed to this moral vacuum. If you don't have an alternative, and I think from at least the last 5 or so decades, we see that no alternative has been established. Again, the assumption was reason and enlightenment and humanism is simply going to emerge from education. The higher
I don't know what the fuck she's talking about. Who the hell said this that she's claiming said this? Sounds like a bunch of idiots to me. That is not at all how things work. She says it a little bit more clear here.
your level of education, the more reasonable you are. Now, what we see on this...
So she's saying this concept that every additional year you have in school, that you're getting smarter than the previous year. That would be nice. Maybe that at face value, that might make sense. But if those institutions are doing more indoctrination than education, then no, you're going to get dumber the further along you go.
Yeah.
Display in our universities is the very opposite.
The protests that are going on in American university at the moment look to me more like anti-Jewish, anti-Semitism.
And the vector for this virulent anti-Semitism is Islam. It's radical Islam. On every university, there is a Muslim student association. There are Islamic centers, there are mosques, there are websites, and they propagate, and sometimes in the most sinister ways, their faith and their antipathies, and the antipathy that radical Islamists hold against Jews have had, they're running amok in our universities and our schools. So if from one day to the next we wake up, the 7th of October last year, that horrible event happened where 1,200 Israelis were killed, many of them young people, many of them actually on the left, in kibbutzim, and many, many women raped and people mutilated. And you would think that in making that moral reckoning, that students here or anywhere, even fellow Muslims have said, This is absolutely heinous, and it has to be condemned all the way. That is not what we are seeing. What we are seeing is the investment that radical Muslims made here on our soil, those young people completely brainwashed into coming out and blaming the victim, draping themselves in kafirs, shouting genocidal slogans and chants on our campuses, and thinking that they are replicating 1968 and see themselves as anti-war patrons. There is something that is going on. There is the mind virus of wokeism. There is the mind virus of radical Islam. And atheism is not the answer. I cannot go with all conscience to these young people and say there is nothing to believe in. Because the more we say there is nothing to believe in, there is nothing, then someone else comes and fills that nothing with something. And I don't like what I'm seeing.
You want to say something before I do?
No, go ahead.
So I already talked about this earlier. It just reminds me of the very common discussion that happens where a Muslim asks an ex-Muslim, what do you believe in if not Allah? And the correct answer isn't nothing. And the people that are answering, they know a lot more than that. They're just not saying it. They're confused by the question. They think the question is simply, do you not believe in God? And then the answer is yes, but that's not the question. The question is, what is your whole damn worldview? Not just the question whether or not you believe in God. There's like 1,000 questions in it. And she's saying that atheism, as if it is a philosophy, which it isn't, it's just one idea. There's no God. She's saying that atheism as a philosophy doesn't provide anything. It's the same thing the Muslims would be saying to the ex-Muslims who answer, I don't believe in anything. We believe in a lot of things. I believe there's cause and effect.
Yeah.
I believe humans are capable of figuring it out. I have lots of beliefs. I think there's confusion over some words here, semantics problem, because there's atheists that say, oh no, it's not that I don't believe in God, it's that I don't have a belief in God. Semantics, dude. And then they confuse all the Christians and Muslims.
Yeah, I don't know when it comes to talking about what atheism is and what it's actually doing, assuming that it's actually a social force. This is not the case. That's not what's happening at all.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about society. It doesn't say anything about morality. It doesn't say anything about how people should live together or not. It's just one little idea. There's no God.
And there's a problem with the whole idea of trying to fill the vacuum, if we want to call it a vacuum, with Christianity. The whole problem in the West right now for Christianity is that people are leaving it. What is it that you're going to be doing in order to bring them back into that thing that they have been leaving? This is something that's separate from wokeism. This is a global issue. So if you're looking at the fastest growing religion in the world, is the no religion. People might still have an affiliation with some spirituality, but they don't want the organized religion. And so I'm not sure what's being advocated here on a practical level.
Well, you made a good point. If her prescription is bring back Christianity, in the context of every individual, we're talking about an individual that just left Christianity. What reasoning are you giving to that person to adopt this view?
And what practical tools are being used in this case? So if there is a certain propaganda that is mixing wokeism with a kind of an Islamic speech, what is it that you're presenting to counter that? Maybe she has some points. I didn't honestly look at what practical things that she's proposing, but it's really hard to say that there is some way to just like nullify what's happening and go back to how things were, I don't know, 100 years ago, or I'm not sure what time frame she's thinking about.
I don't know, but like the idea, I know there's just like this is the case with Muslims and ex-Muslims, there are ex-Christians who keep going to church because of the social aspect.
Yeah.
And these people are choosing to do that, unlike doing what she's saying, which is just to, okay, I'm just going to believe in God again and then go to church. No, they're saying, I'm going to stay an atheist and I'm going to church.
And I would bet that there are certain people who go to those encampments that have no problem going to church afterwards.
What encampment?
She was talking about those things that are happening in universities where young people are showing up. There are certain people. It's probably not going to be a big percentage, but I don't think it's inconceivable for people to see that there is a disconnect between the two, because what you're actually seeing is an event that happened very quickly and people are reacting to something that they don't fully understand. And so when they're doing what they're doing, they think they're doing something, but they're doing something else. And in reality, the underlying ideological framework is not as solid as it might appear.
Not much different than the way I was a Muslim.
Yeah, even more tenuous in this case, because it's something that's very, very visceral. People reacted to something that's completely different.
Like, so let me make it clear for the audience. What I thought Islam was, and I was living that conception, and then I became an ex-Muslim, I found out, or this is what made me become an ex-Muslim, that, oh crap, my conception of Islam, the way I was living it, was so different than so many other people, and the book agrees with them, not me. The Quran, specifically jinn and exorcisms. Anyway.
Where there is an existing faith that is strong, it is very difficult for all of these other mind viruses to encroach upon and take over. That is as far as I'm going. I'm not saying let's start the crusades again. I'm just saying let's stand for what we have. Let's embrace it and let's defend it.
She said a faith that is strong. A couple of things I want to point out. She's saying what I said earlier about strong, meaning like has a lot of weight behind it. There's a lot of people in it already. And then she said faith. She uses the term the same way I always understood it. It's the opposite of reason. The way I say it to people is, look, there's two ways to believe. There's the method of reason and there's the method of faith. And faith is like believing without a reason, believing without criticism, whatever. She says later, I don't remember if I put it in this video, she refers to the terms objectivity and subjectivity. And what she's saying about the God question is that it's a subjective issue, meaning you can't, and the way she said it, you can't find out if it's really right or wrong. So just go ahead and choose the nicer one or something. Or the practical one, practical in other ways. Like all this other stuff she's saying. It is strong. It can combat. She said a very practical thing. If there's an area with a strong faith versus an area with no strong faith, the one that combats external mind viruses better is the one with the strong faith, the practical thing.
Yeah.
And to defend it, you have to have a counter message. There is a great deal of activism knocking on young people's doors, telling them, do you want to know the difference between right and wrong? Do you want to know the difference between truth and false? And I don't see any counter activism coming from humanists or coming from atheists. I see you and my fellow friends just as bewildered as anyone else when you look at this. So the people who are in charge of universities, people who are in charge of educating and developing young minds are looking on and thinking, what the heck is going on here? And it never has been the right.
I don't see why you need Christianity in order to counter falsehood. You just go and look at the methods that are being used. You don't have to bring in all that huge baggage that comes with Christianity. You're looking at something that might be factually wrong. You go and criticize that thing on its own. You don't have to invoke all that stuff that is just irrelevant.
She's very heavily strawmanning us.
I do sympathize to some extent with the framework that she's presenting. That from a practical point of view, it seems that she has a plan to leverage what she perceives as that strong historical momentum that can be used to counteract Islamism in the first place, and then wokeism. I'm not sure how that's going to happen through Christianity, but when it comes to turning that into a plan of action, I feel that it's as bad as what she's criticizing about atheism. Atheism is not a plan of action to begin with, but I'm not sure I'm discerning in what she's saying an actual set of steps that, okay, go counteract that. Counteract that how? Propagate the Bible? What is it that she's trying to do?
Yeah, I would like to hear about that too. I didn't hear it in this entire video. How exactly Christian ideas counteract woke ideas? I don't know.
Okay, I'm guessing right now when it comes to looking at the societal forces that are counteracting wokeism, there is a correlation between the Christian right and that position of counteracting wokeism. But that's not the same thing as saying, okay, this position is what you need to adopt for this. It's just
well, in that sense, she's just telling people to be on the right politically.
Which
you don't need to do with what you can do without Christianity.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Attitude. There's a great deal of denial. Yes, there's a clash of civilization, and this clash of civilizations has been going on at least since 1989. And the attitude of Western leaders, political leaders, academic leaders, media leaders, has been to hide in denial. It's been to deny it, and the more you deny it, the more those adversaries who are clashing with us benefit from it. And right now, I don't think atheist humanism is offering any answers. I challenge you to come up with an elaborate message to fight these people.
I challenge you to bring that set of steps to counteract.
This is the same as Allah's challenge to us.
Yeah, to some extent.
Because first of all, the analogy with the Allah's challenge, there was already books written that were better than the Quran.
Yeah.
And for anyone to say to us that claim now, the challenge, make another book or whatever, that has already happened. You guys are ignoring it. She's ignoring objectivism, for example. There's a book by Ayn Rand called The Virtue of Selfishness. It's a good book. Everyone should read it. She didn't read it, I guess. I don't think she read it. She didn't read The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. I've never heard her talk about David Deutsch. She has talked a lot about Karl Popper. Karl Popper's books, there's some moral stuff in there. It's mostly just epistemology. He was just trying to understand the difference between pseudoscience and science. So it's just on the side of reason. He doesn't say a lot about morality, although that was he saying it to you? No, that was somebody else. That was this morning. There's this thing called the paradox of tolerance that he coined this phrase, I guess.
Oh, you did mention that before.
In email, yes.
Yeah.
The paradox of tolerance is this. If we're tolerant to intolerance, that will breed more intolerance. We need to be intolerant of intolerance.
Yes.
And this is how we get self-defense.
Yeah.
And this is how, like, if somebody was to say, hey, we can't have infinite peace and we can't have infinite freedom, what they mean is infinite freedom would be like, if somebody tried to come kill me, I let him. No, I have to stop him.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, in a sense, there's no infinite freedom. There's no infinite peace either. If somebody started a war like Hitler, World War II, we have to stop him. We have to go to war.
True.
So that we can bring peace back. Yeah, so that's it. I guess that was good.
Yeah. So I do wish her all the best. I like I said, the experience that she has conveyed in the books that I have read is a truly important experience, and I'm sure that it inspired and still inspires people to maybe re-examine some of the things that they grow up with and view them with a more critical way. What is it that she's doing right now? I'm not entirely sure yet. Maybe this is it's still a little bit early to judge. I would be interested in seeing how this is going to develop. But from what I've seen right now, I disagree on the fact that she's making a direct connection between Christianity and whatever action that she is trying to make, not only from the point of view of this being in principle an issue, but also from the point of view of action. It's not clear what this actually entails.
So I want to give my last words now. I said this in my reaction video about this, where she mentioned that atheists think theists are idiots because they're not being reasonable. Here's the thing. Theists, they're using the method of faith for the God question and maybe a few other things. But in their normal life, like let's say it's a physician, he's not using the faith method in that work. He's using reason.
Yeah.
He's using the scientific approach. So the vast majority of his life is he's using the method of reason, not faith. I wanted to make a connection now. Me to Ayaan Hirsi Ali now. Okay, so despite the fact that I said explained some mistakes she made, and that I recognize she's using this method of faith, which I disagree with, she's using the method of reason in almost every part of her life. So, as an example, so I consider myself a Aliian. Just like I'm an atheist Christian. I'm a Socratesian. I'm an Einsteinian. I'm a Randian. I'm an Aliian. The stuff that I agree with, the reasonable things, like I'm going to say the biggest one I think now, it's kind of new. I started an organization, a nonprofit, to rid the world of apostasy laws. I got the idea from her. She made this organization called AHA Foundation. Its job, its role in humanity is to bring freedom to the world. That's a distant statement, but very early on it says what they're working on right now is changing the culture and changing the laws, specifically with regard to women's rights all over the world, even in America. She's working on changing the culture, and she's working with lawmakers to change the laws. If you look deep enough on that website, AHA Foundation, it talks about the death penalty too.
Yeah.
I started an organization in that conception. I want to learn what she's doing. I want to learn. It has been very successful, AHA Foundation. Very successful changing laws. It's surprising me that, for one thing, I get surprised when I find out America had some of these laws. And then I'm equally surprised that she helped get rid of them. That's amazing. So whatever criticisms I have of her, they're small compared to my praise of her. That's what I wanted to say in the end.
Yeah, and that actually should contrast with the way that that the other direction happens. So usually, if someone is in initially a Muslim, a prominent Muslim, for example, and then leaves the religion, people completely denounce him because that person is no longer a part of the group. From my perspective, what's happening here would be the equivalent thing, but I'm not saying that, okay, she's now no longer an atheist, she's going to be completely renounced. That's not the case at all. I'm saying that there is some criticism to how she's proceeding with this, but it's still the same criticism that I would give to anybody based on the content that they are providing. I still, like I said, I still respect all what she has been doing, and I'm sure that what she's doing right now is in many ways still a continuation of the same impetus that she had before. It's just that she perceives the tools that she had before as maybe having used up their utility, and now there's another tool that might be replacing that.
Well, she wants to do it in conjunction. She said that very clearly. We need reason and faith, she said.
Yeah.
So that's it then. That was good. Thanks, Usama. That was fun.
Okay. Bye.
Have a good day.
You too.